Hello and welcome to the Ellen Made Book Club. Today we're doing a reading challenge check-in. This year I'm doing a bunch of different reading challenges that are hosted by different booktubers, and I did a video like this, like my first check-in in, I want to say like the end of April, somewhere around there. And now it's been 4 more months, and so I figured it was time to do another check-in, or like I want to do one, so I'm gonna do one. All of the challenges are year long, and most of them have prompts per month, but I'm not doing those in order because that would be a logistical nightmare. And I would also have to read like 7 books every month, and I don't. So I use one and the same book for different prompts on the different challenges, and they might not line up like in the same month. So I have my little notebook here that I keep track of everything, and I use these little like star stickers. I hope you can see. They're like shiny and holographic and like different colors and they make me very happy. So whenever I read a book, I fill out my little challenge prompts here and I give myself a star or a little heart. So that makes it all very like satisfying to me because I get this like shiny page, and yeah, I think I'm doing pretty well. So I want to just go through all of the challenges one by one and tell you which books fit each prompt. And this might not be your thing, and if so, then feel free to skip this video. But if you're the same kind of person that I am, you'll enjoy the little squares being filled out and matching stuff to prompts. Because that's fun. So yeah, let's get started with the first challenge. First up, we have the Buzzword challenges by Kayla at Books and Lala. And this year there are 2 different challenges, one for the titles and one for the covers, and I'm doing both. So starting with the title challenge. So in my last check-in, I had read 5 books for the Buzzword title challenge, and since then I have read 3 more. The prompt for March is to read a book with the word thing in the title, and for that I read Tell Me Something Good by Court Stevens. The prompt for July was to read a book with punctuation in the title, and for that I read Idle Burning by Rin Usami. The prompt for August was to read a book with the word with in the title, and for that I read The Old Woman with the Knife by Gu Byeong-mo, and that was actually a book that I read in August. So that worked out. So all in all, I'm on track for this challenge. I have 4 books left to read, and there are 4 months left of the year. So moving on to the Buzzword cover challenge. The last time I checked in, I had read 4 books, and since then I have read 3 more. So I'm a little bit more behind, and I have 5 more books to go on this challenge, but we're getting there. The prompt for January was to read a book with a pattern on the cover, and for that I read Havoc by Christopher Bollen. The prompt for August was to read a book with some kind of transportation on the cover, and for that I read Pet by Catherine Chidgey. And this has a big pen on the cover, but if you look a little bit closer, it has a boat in the pen. So that's what counts for transportation. The prompt for September is to read a book with foliage on the cover, and for that I read We Will Be Jaguars by Nemonten and Kimo. And then I have 5 more books to read this year, so I'm a little bit behind, but I'm sure that will work itself out. I have books picked out for the remaining prompts, but I don't know if I'm going to be in the mood to read all of them, you know, in the coming months. So we'll see. We're getting there, but yeah, we have a bit of a ways to go. Next up, we have the Read Good challenge by Ben at Ben Reads Good, and this one I'm doing very well on. Last time I had read 5 books, and since then I have read 5 more books for this challenge, or I have 5 more books that fit the prompts for this challenge. The prompt for February was Flamuary, so that was to read a book with fire or like flames on the cover, and for that I read The Compound by Rawle. It's kind of small, but there's definitely a fire going in the background between the sand dunes in the desert. The prompt for March was Ides of March, which was to read a book with 15 letters in the title, and that was a challenge. I counted so many letters and so many titles, but in the end I realized that We Will Be Jaguars by Nemonten and Kimo has 15 words in the title, so I could count that for this prompt. The prompt for May was Déjà Vu, so that was to reread a book. And I had originally planned to read The Brothers Lionheart for this prompt by Astrid Lindgren, but I had already read Ronja Ravadotter, Ronja the Robber's Daughter, and that was also a reread, so I just decided to count that for this prompt because yeah, I was just not in the mood to reread anything else. So, and I also like have a tendency to make things harder for myself when I don't need to, so I'm counting that. June was Reading Shame Forgiveness month, and I had a couple of other books picked out for that initially, but I decided to put Heartstopper by Alice Oseman on that prompt because I just think that's a series that has been very popular and I've been wanting to read it and I just haven't, and I didn't really think it was something that I would enjoy, and I was like, you know, not very excited about it. But once I read it, I loved it, and so I am doing this to my past self, and you know, not that I should have been ashamed, but yeah, I don't know. It wasn't a book that I was particularly ashamed about not having read, but I feel like I should be. If I decided not to read it. Like, it would be a shame not to read that series. That's how I'm kind of using this prompt to fit my reading, okay? The prompt for August is to read a Booker Prize winning author, and I had a few books picked out for this, and then I wasn't in the mood for any of them, and then I realized that there is a bonus prompt, which is to read a book by Agatha Christie, and you can use that as kind of a joker for any of the other prompts. And I read And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie, so I decided to count that for the Booker Prize prompt. But now I'm in the middle of, I have read one of the short stories in Heart Lamp by Banu Mushtaq, and this was the winner of the International Booker Prize 2025. I cannot speak, okay. So that would fit. I haven't finished this yet, but like I'm putting And Then There Were None on this prompt for now, but I might change it out for that book when I've finished it. Okay, so now I just have two prompts left. I have October for October, which is to read a book with an ugly cover. And I have a pick for that. And then I have Decembros, which is the prompt for December, to read a book about brothers. And I have a book picked out for that as well. Reading Good, no. The Read Good challenge is looking good so far. And yeah, I'm excited about the books that I have left to read as well. So very happy with the results on this one so far. Next up, we have the Savidge Prompts 2025 Reading Challenge, and this is hosted by Simon at Savidge Reads and Louise at Louise Savidge Muses. And this one is going okay. I had read 3 books last time, and since then I have added 4 more. The prompt for March was to read a book with a kitchen utensil on the cover, and I had a bunch of different options picked out for that, but I decided to go with The Old Woman with the Knife by Gu Byeong-mo because there's a big knife on it and I think it looks like a kitchen knife, so I'm gonna call it a kitchen utensil. The prompt for May was to read a book by your favorite author's favorite author, and I don't really know who my favorite author is, but one of them is Fredrik Backman, at least for the time being, and one of his favorite authors is Astrid Lindgren, and his favorite book by her is The Brothers Lionheart, which I was going to read, but again, I wasn't in the mood to reread that right now, and again, I've already read Ronja the Robber's Daughter by Astrid Lindgren, so that counts for this prompt as well, and so I decided to put that on there, which also counts. Like, I make things difficult for myself, and I'm trying to stop that. It feels like cheating in my head, and it's not, but never mind. The prompt for June was to read a book set in a hotel, and for that I read Havoc by Christopher Bollen. That worked out very well because I had struggled so much to find a book set in a hotel, but that one is like the whole book, and so yeah, that was perfect. For a book with dual timelines, which was the prompt for July, I read Pet by Catherine Chidgey. That is set in 2014 and 1984 and is an excellent book. And those are all of the books that I read for this challenge. And I still have 5 more to go, and some of them are a bit tricky. I have books picked out for them, but we'll see what I'm in the mood for and yeah, how that goes. But I'm kind of on track, a little bit behind, but I think it'll work out. The Classic 6 challenge by Suey at Suey's Book Banter is to read 6 classics throughout the year. And I'm not doing so hot on that one. I have read And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie, but that is the only one. I do have some classics that I want to read and some that are like short and a bit lighter than the ones that I had picked out originally. So I still have hope that I'm gonna fit in like 1 or 2 at least before the end of the year. And so, yeah, is that a spider? I don't know. There might be a spider in my ceiling, but we'll deal with that later. Okay, I have made some progress on the Climathon 2025, which is created by Tasmin at Tasmin 2. And I read We Will Be Jaguars by Nemonte Nankimo, and that fits like 8 out of the 12 prompts. It covers a lot, but I don't maybe want to... I would like to read more books for the Climathon, but I do have Crooked Seeds by Karen Jennings as well, which deals with a drought and like a water shortage, and so I'm counting that for the water prompt. We Will Be Jaguars, I'm counting at least for Indigenous author and activist author. I had books picked out for activist author, but I think you know, those 2 at least I'm gonna count We Will Be Jaguars for. And I'm not doubling up on the other challenges, but for this one, I think I'm gonna have to, or I will never complete the challenge. And I don't know if that's even completing the challenge, but that's not the point. The point is to read books about the climate and the environment and our planet and, you know, our life on it. And so, you know, whatever I read is good. I also think that the book that I'm currently reading, which is Oil on Water by Helon Habila, will count for... Sorry, I'm just keeping track of the spider. Yeah, this has to do with oil and water. And so there is a prompt that is about earth, which includes like, you know, oil, because that comes from the earth, and like, you know, what's it called? Like fossil fuels. This will count for that. Yeah, I think I'm also being a bit hard on myself with this challenge and thinking that I should read a lot more nonfiction about climate change and things, but like that's not necessarily what I'm in the mood for this particular year of my life. And like, that's okay. I can still read books that touch on the subject and like, you know, read fiction books that include those kinds of issues in different ways. And yeah, that can still count. And I think it's better to at least like connect a book to a prompt on this challenge and like talk about it and like have that be part of the discussion instead of like not reading anything or like not mentioning anything and then forgetting all about it. You know what I mean? So yeah, this is one of the more difficult challenges for me this year, but one that is very important. So I'm doing my best and I'm reading a little bit, and it is what it is. I'm not going to be too hard on myself on that. Anyways, moving on to the final one, I think. Yes, the last challenge is my diversity book bingo that I'm hosting this year, and you're very welcome to join if it sounds at all interesting to you. The point is to read as diversely as possible and to read books with different kinds of representation and also like spread across the world. So there is a bingo board with 25 different prompts that are meant to be kind of easy to fulfill, but then the challenge is to mark off the 6 continents and the 5 types of diversity representation or own voices. And this all goes together. Like any book that you use to check off a continent also should go on the bingo board. So you should never have to read more than 25 books to get a blackout on this bingo board, while also fulfilling the continents and the diversity representation. I know it's a bit like complicated, but some people get it and some people don't, but that's fine. This is how I'm doing. So the prompt for the first square is to read a book set in a country that is new to you. And for that, I read The Queens of Sarmiento Park by Camila Sosa Villada. That is set in Argentina, and I had never read anything set there before, as far as I can remember. So this book then checks off the new to me country on the bingo board, and it also checks off South America on the continents. And the point is to keep going. Like, even if you have a book set in South America already, like, try to add another. You don't have to read 20 books set in North America and then one in each of the other continents, you know? The point is to have a bit more of an even spread. At least that's the challenge that I'm setting myself. You do it however you do it, but like, you don't have to stop at one as soon as you check off one of the diversity or continent prompts. So the Queens of Sarmiento Park crosses off the new to me country prompt on the bingo board, and the continent South America, and also the LGBTQIA plus prompt on the diversity representation, because it is about a group of trans women. The next square that I filled out since the last check-in was memoir or biography, and for that I read We Will Be Jaguars by Namonte Nkimo. That is set in South America, in Ecuador, and it is written by an indigenous author and very much revolves around that group of people and experience and, you know, issues surrounding that. And that is also a minority group, so it also crosses off the minority prompt on the diversity representation. And this also gave me my first bingo on the bingo board, so yay! The next square on the bingo board that I filled out was the library prompt, which is to read a book from the library. For that, I read Displacement by Kiku Hughes. That is set in North America, and it has minority representation, which is Japanese Americans, and it also has LGBTQA plus representation. For the prompt 5 stars, I read Pet by Catherine Chidgey. That was a 5-star read for me, and that is set in New Zealand, so I'm counting that for the Australia continent. There is some minority representation in this book, and you could count it for that if you wanted to. I decided not to because it's not the main character, like, it's, you know, a side character, and that plays a part in the story, but it's not like a huge part, and we don't really get like first-hand account of that experience, so like I didn't want to count it for the prompt based on that. So yeah, this one only counts for the continent of Australia, which is totally fine. The next prompt is to read a book that fits a prompt on someone else's list. And for this, I read The Old Woman with the Knife by Gu Byeong-mo. And as I have talked about earlier in this video, this book also fulfilled prompts on the Buzzword challenge to read a book with a word with in the title, and also the kitchen utensil prompt on the Savidge Prompts 2025 challenge. So that counts for this prompt because it counted for those prompts. This is set in Asia, so I get a point for that, and no other diversity representation. The next prompt that I filled out was the book and adaptation prompt, which is to read a book and then watch an adaptation of it, whether it's a series or a movie or a play or a graphic novel version of the book or whatever you want. And I read Heartstopper by Alice Oseman, and I watched not all, but a bit of the Netflix adaptation and really enjoyed that. I watched it very soon after having read the first book, and I read the first volume in like an hour, and then when I watched the show, it was like, it took so long to get there. I do think it's very well done, but I was like, I'm not gonna sit through like 6 hours of this or however long it is when I have already read the whole story from volume 1 in an hour. You know what I mean? So I might come back to that later, but I have watched an episode, maybe 2, and yeah, it was really good. That book, Heartstopper, or the series, is set in Europe, in the UK, and it has LGBTQIA plus representation. For the prompt mental health, I read Crooked Seeds by Karen Jennings. This is set in South Africa, so it gives me a point for Africa, and it has disability representation, as the main character has lost her leg, and yeah, that's a main part of the story. And the mental health part was also very big part of the story. It's kind of a depressing book, and there's a lot of hardship, and like I think the main character suffers with a lot of mental health issues. It's not like explicitly talked about, but it just comes across, and it's it's a tough read in that sense. But I think that it's a very good portrayal of just going through hard times. And so, yeah, it just felt very prominent in the book that mental health was an issue for the main character. And so that's why I counted it for this prompt. For the prompt migration, I read Fundamentally by Nusayba Yunus. This is set in Asia, in Iraq, and it has minority representation, both in terms of like the characters and also the author, and it also has LGBTQIA plus representation. And it was a fantastic book. And then the final prompt that I have filled out is favorite author. And since I counted Fredrik Backman as one of my favorite authors for another challenge where I had to read a book by my favorite author's favorite author, I decided to count him for this as well, because that just makes sense. And I read My Friends by Fredrik Backman, and that is set in Europe, and it could also have LGBTQIA plus representation. There's a little bit of that. It's not really a main part of the story, but it's there. So I don't know. You could count it. I don't know if I will. But yeah, it's there, which is good. I do have 2 more bingos. I have one across the top row, and then I have one down on the left row, and then I also have one on the diagonal. So now I have 3 bingo rows, which is great, but I also have 1, 2, 3. I have 7 prompts left to fill out for this challenge, but I do have books picked out for most of them, and some of them I've started, and so yeah, we'll see how this goes. Hopefully I can double up on some of the challenges, like read one for this diversity book bingo that also fulfills a prompt on another challenge that I'm doing. So yeah, we'll see. But that's how I'm doing so far. I'm pretty happy with my progress. And, yeah, we'll see how it goes. And I guess my next check-in will be at the end of the year, and hopefully I will have completed all the challenges by then. Let me know if you're also doing any of these challenges and how you're doing on them. And I would be especially interested if you're doing the Diversity Book Bingo challenge, and if you have any updates for me on that. And if you found any new favorites thanks to that challenge, or like picked up something that you wouldn't have read otherwise. I'm very curious about that. And also, do you have bingo yet? And like, I don't know, tell me all the things. And yeah, I would love to know. But that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next one.